Done. All right, students. Hello, all. I hope you all are doing great. Welcome back to the live streaming of the daily news analysis sessions. And today we'll be starting with a fresh month, new date, 1st of August 2022. I'm your editor, Prithviraj Singh, and I do hereby present on daily basis from ClatPrep. We do present the live streaming of the Hindu newspaper analysis. Well, there were some important editorials which were published in the newspaper today. And one such editorial which talks about the international north-south transport corridor is very, very important. Well, students, India, because see, the Central Asian countries have huge potential. I'm talking about the countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. They have huge potential and they are rich in mineral resources and the energy reserves. But the problem is that they are landlocked. They don't have direct access to sea. And India, in order to stretch and expand its infrastructure projects into Central Asian nations, have to build a road connectivity connecting the port area or the port region. So, international north-south transport corridor as an idea was conceived way back in the year 2002, and it also was, and many countries later joined it. But a formal inauguration of this corridor happened just a while back. Now, Russia has its port. So here you can see Caspian Sea, and these are the other Central Asian nations of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and the others. And here is Russia. So Russia has this seaport called as Astrakhan Seaport, and they've also built a new port called as Lagan Airport, right? So Lagan Port, which is new Caspian port. Now Russia can directly, ship its commodities from the Astrakhan port or the Lagan port to Caspian Sea, and then it may be, collected at Anzali port at Iran or Ahmedabad port. Right? From Iran, it would go further to the ports like Chabahar port, where India is investing heavily, and also Bandar Abbas, which is also being financed by Russian Federation. Right. So in this sense, this road network which connects, which brings Eurasia, closer to the sea area or the seaport, and in fact to India, is called as International North-South Corridor, which North-South Transport Corridor, which runs from north to south, right? And it is being seen as a complementary and a counter to the Belt and Road Initiative, which runs from east to west, and that is a brainchild of China, right? So International North-South Corridor running from north to south and would connect all the Central Asian countries and would bring Eurasia closer to India, right? So very important. They may ask you the question that where is Astrakhan port and Lagan port located? Russia, Caspian Sea, the location, and Iran has Chabahar port in the south, and this Chabahar port connects, the Central Asian nations plus Bandar Abbas port. So India is investing at Chabahar port, right? And if Chabahar port is being seen, I mean, Indian investment at Chabahar port is being seen as a counter to China's investment at Gwadar port in Pakistan, right? And Gwadar and Chabahar port are very nearby. I mean, there is not much distance. It may be around 120, 130 kilometers, right? But then Pakistan is our enemy state, and therefore we cannot access Central Asian countries through a land route running from Pakistan. So therefore, in JNPT yeah, at Bombay and the Kandla port have jointly set up a port trust, and they are working on this project. They send the shipments to Bombay and Kandla directly to to Iran, that is Chabahar port and Bandar Abbas, and then they are being transported to the Central Asian countries. Now, International North-South Transport Corridor is also important for India for its stakes in Afghanistan. So Afghanistan, which is presently being ruled by the Taliban regime, India has huge stakes there, and many investments in the infrastructure projects are there in Afghanistan. Right. So therefore, it is a very important and very important transport, multimodal transport corridor, which has sea routes also, as you can see, Caspian Sea, then road connectivity, train connectivity. So therefore, it is multimodal transport corridor. And recently, when on on in the last week of July, Russia sent its shipment from Astrakhan port to Iran's Anjali port, Astrakhan port in Anjali port, and then it went to the Bandar Abbas port where Russia has its investment, and then it reached Nhava Shava port in Mumbai. Right. So in this sense, it is a very important multimodal transport project, and it's a 7,200-kilometer multimodal transport corridor. And it would consolidate the emerging Eurasian free trade area. Now, although India has not openly objected Russian invasion of Ukraine, but then it has, publicly, it is asking to for peace. It is it is also at the same time finding alternative supplies of precious oil and gas. Right. So there is a substantial shift from the policy of non-alignment to multi-alignment. Right. Because today India is there in SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where China and Russia are its members. At the same time, India is working hand in hand with Russia and the other Central Asian countries, including Iran, in the international North-South transport corridor. And we all know that Russia and Iran are being facing sanctions again by the Western countries like the United States after, especially after its invasion into Ukraine. So India is balancing between both. India is a part of Quad, which is a grouping in the Indo-Pacific, which includes America, India, Japan, and Australia. At the same time, India is also the part of INSTC and SCO, right? So in this sense, we have transgressed from non-alignment to multi-alignment. Right. Now, today, there are many countries which have joined INSTC, like Kazakhstan, Belarus, Oman, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Syria. They all signed the instruments of accession to become the member of INSTC. Now, INSTC is expected to reduce the freight costs by 30%. By because normally, in order to transit, you have to cross the Suez Canal, right? Suez Canal. Now that route is time consuming and also cost. It also incurs huge cost, right? So INSTC would reduce the freight cost by 30% and the journey time by almost 40%, which is a very big achievement in comparison with the conventional deep sea route of Suez Canal, right? Now, it recently happened in the last year that a container ship named Ever Given was stuck in the Suez, and this actually blockaded the Suez Canal for quite a while, and it halted the maritime traffic between the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. Right. So India is investing, as I said, in the Iran Chabahar port, and is also, invest financing the construction of a 500-kilometer Chabahar Zahedan railway line. It's very important. Chabahar Zahedan railway line financed by Government of India. Now, at the same time, as I said, that this corridor will allow India access to Afghanistan and Central Asia. So this is there. Now it is being financed by Exim Bank, and this would actually, internationalize India's infrastructure state. So these are some important details which you must keep in mind, and the strategic location and how the countries are related. It's a very important article. Moving to the next news article. So this is now continuing the INSTC, which synchronizes with Ashgabat Agreement, which was signed by India in 2018 and the other countries, the figures mentioned in the bracket. And this agreement also facilitates the international transport and transit corridor. Now moving to the next news article on the screen. Well, students, you all would be knowing that after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there has been food and oil crisis. Ukraine is known for its huge food reserves. It is also called as wheat basket of Europe because of large scale wheat production. But the invasion and the war in Ukraine has resulted into food crisis. Now, the Indian government is asking for wheat waiver from WTO. That means Indian government want to push its wheat exports to the international markets, and WTO is has not given an approval because the food that is there in the PDS, the food grains or the wheat which is there kept in the warehouses of Food Corporation of India is subsidized. And this is the reason why it actually distorts the principles of free and fair trade, because it would be as the lesser cost, and no country would want this happening to their disadvantage. At the same time, India must also understand that such wheat exports would result into the scarcity of wheat in India, and we are already facing wheat scarcity this season. We saw very less wheat production, so therefore it has huge risk involved. So this is what this article is talking about. Now, it has been find a permanent we must find a permanent solution to the issue of public stock holding, or PSH, of food to protect India's food security policy, right? Or PSH policy. So we must have enough or buffer stock of food grains, especially wheat, before we go ahead with any decision to export it. Correct. So we must have a robust PSH policy or public stock holding policy to assure or to ensure India's food security. Definitely, the farmers are being given minimum support price, and this is generally higher than the market prices, right? And the food or the grains are being procured at MSP. Right. So the PSH policy, that means the public stockholding policy, serves two objectives. The one is that of offering remunerative prices to farmers, or the best prices to the farmers in the form of MSPs, and providing the subsidized food to the underprivileged. Right? But then when you open this, or when you try to divert it or sell into the international market, it is comes as a disadvantage to the other countries, right? Because subsidies actually reduces the price, and then it becomes fairly it gives a competitive advantage to any country which is giving the subsidies, right? So it is goes against the principle of free and fair trade. Now, under WTO law, such price support based procurement from farmer is counted as a trade distorting subsidy, as I just mentioned. And if given beyond the permissible limit, breaches it breaches the WTO law. Right. So such international diversions or selling it on the international market breaches WTO law. Well, currently India has temporary relief due to peace clause. So India is being, given the peace clause, which bars countries from bringing legal challenges against price support-based procurement for food security purposes. Right. So we do have a peace clause, and we can, legally sell them in the foreign market, but the problem is that if we do it, we would be running out of the stock, and we already have scarcity of wheat this season, as I just mentioned, because of the long the winters and the in fact, sorry, the early arrival of summers in the month of March, right, which is the harvest season of wheat. So a permanent solution is still not in the offing, and we want a permanent solution to the issue of public stock holding of food, or we must have a strong and robust PSH policy. Well, in the same way, in fact, there is, as I said, that there is an unfair advantage in global agriculture trade if we sell the wheat to the international market, and it might depress the global prices and have an adverse impact on the agricultural trade of other countries. Now, countries may release surplus food stocks in the international market in accordance with WTO law, right? Because the Geneva Ministerial Food Security Declaration states that the countries may release surplus food stocks, in the international market in accordance with the WTO law, right? So it must be in accordance with the WTO law. Well, paragraph 4 of 2013 WTO decision on PSH or public stock holding for food security purposes clearly states that countries procuring food for food security purposes shall ensure that such procured food does not distort trade or adversely affect the food security of other members. Now, the history of waivers at WTO is fraught with huge letdowns. The recently adopted waiver on intellectual property rights for COVID-19 medical products is a case in point. Now, students, we know that when COVID-19 broke out, in the pandemic, generally there is a mechanism under WTO called as TRIPS, right? That is trade-related intellectual property rights systems, right? And this ensures that the patent, the the intellectual property is being preserved. But because COVID-19 there was a pandemic and it was very difficult to control, and we had to put in the joint efforts to overcome from this challenge. So therefore, they diluted the intellectual property provisions for COVID-19 medical products. Right? But the IP waiver is restricted to only COVID-19 vaccines and does not cover the diagnostics and the therapeutics. Right? So it was restricted just to vaccines. So the shallowness of the IP waiver, although there were many objections to this IP waiver, and it has been seen as a huge letdown. So the shallowness of the IP waiver is further reinforced by the fact that it is limited to only patents and does not cover other IP rights. Right? So in this sense, it is just limited to the patents. Moreover, as per Article 9, Clause 3 of WTO agreement, waivers can be adopted only in exceptional circumstances, right? So it is a clear provision under Article 9, Clause 3 of WTO agreement, which says that waivers, any provision of can be adopted, waivers can be adopted only in exceptional circumstances, right? So when you have exceptional circumstances like COVID-19 or pandemic, then only you can, call for the waivers. Now, WTO filibustered for 2 years, acknowledging a once in a century pandemic such as COVID-19 as an exceptional circumstances. Now, it took long time for WTO to declare COVID-19 as an exceptional circumstances to actually, go ahead with the IP waiver. Right? So, thus the possibility of WTO recognizing the present Ukraine war as an exceptional circumstances is very bleak, right? So, therefore, it is remote, and therefore, India might but then there are apprehensions that India might be diverting some of its public stock to the international market and thus depressing the global prices. But at the same time, as I said, that India should keep in mind their own requirements, their domestic requirements, the public stock holding, because as I said, that the wheat procurement this season has been 57% less than the original target for this season, right? So therefore, we must find a permanent solution for the public stock holding of the of the food grains in order to achieve the goal of food security. Right. So this is all there, and uh, a good article to read. Now, students, something very important. We must understand the WTO classified subsidies. So they, divided subsidies into three boxes: green box, amber box, and blue box. Now, green box subsidies are those subsidies that do not distort trade or cause minimal disruption, right? So there is no limit for the green box subsidies. Then there are those subsidies, which are a very broad range, right? And they are limited to 5% of agriculture production, and this is for 10% for the developing nations. Coming to the blue box subsidies, those subsidies which are broad range of subsidies allowed, but must be designed to minimize trade distortion. So even here there is no limit. So I hope this article is clear. Moving to the next news article on the screen, a very important one on prevention of money laundering and verdict of Supreme Court. Now, students, we know that money laundering is the चल रहा है लाइव में। Yeah. All right, students. Extremely sorry for the technical glitch. Uh, uh, there was an internet error. So I am back with the explanation of PMLA, or Prevention of Money Laundering Act verdict. Now, we students know that money laundering is the conversion of illegitimate money into the legitimate money, right? So the proceeds that you get from various sources, be it the drug trafficking or prostitution rings and or other illegitimate means, whatever money or whatever proceeds that you get from these acts are being diverted into the banking system, and in this way, from a legal money is being, is being made. So this is something which is a very big threat to the country, and it is as bad as terrorism, right? So we do have PMLA Act, and recently an amendment also happened in the year 2019. Now, now this so this is about PMLA, right? And we also had a session a few days back about PMLA, probably on 27th or 28th July. Now, PMLA has been misused by the government, and Supreme Court also examined the allegations of rampant misuse of PMLA, because these days enforcement directorate, can just walk into your anybody's house, without any arrest warrant, and they can book any person or a company under PMLA, right? So PMLA's main purpose was to investigate conversion of illegitimate money into legitimate money, right? So this purpose is lost when it is being misused by the executive. Now, money laundering, as I said that any the proceeds that you generate from that one generates from illegal arms sale, smuggling, activities of organized crime like drug trafficking, prostitution rings, and that money is then is being converted into legitimate money, which is called as money laundering. We did had an act in the year 2002, and we also have PMLA, Maintenance of Records Rules 2005. Now, coming back to the article, well, recently the Supreme Court has come up with a verdict for PMLA, and that has, according to the author, has led to the erosion of constitutional buffers. Now, the verdict was under Vijay Madanlal Chaudhary versus Union of India, and it was delivered on July 27. It was a three-judge bench and not a constitutional bench, three-judge bench. So definitely it can be overturned by a larger bench. But we must understand the name of the case, a very, very important case, and there is high probability of it being asked in the examination. So all the students preparing for law, please keep this in mind. So Vijay Madanlal Chaudhary versus Union of India delivered on July 27. In this, the court upheld various parts of PMLA 2002, despite the law's inversion of seemingly time-honored maxims of criminal jurisprudence. Now, the problem with this verdict, or the problem with Vijay Madanlal Chaudhary versus Union of India, is the twin conditions, or the twin conditions for bail. Right? So they have kind of made bail virtually impossible. Right? This verdict of Vijay Madanlal Chaudhary versus Union of India has literally rendered the bail provision virtually impossible. Right? That means one cannot avail bail under if he or she is being booked under PMLA. Now, what they are trying to say, they have made this, and this has become very controversial indeed. Now, the person would be given bail, or the trial court needs to give bail only. Now, I'm stressing on the word only if the accused proves that he is not guilty of money laundering, right? So, in this sense, the trial court would give the bail to the accused person only when it is satisfied, by the conviction of the accused. That means the accused proves, by the statements or by some evidences that he is not guilty of money laundering. and the court is enough satisfied, then only it would, give the green signal of bail. Number one. That means now because see, in the criminal jurisprudence, an accused is always being regarded as innocent until the verdict doesn't come out, right? So before a person is being declared guilty or let's say innocent, or is being acquitted, he or she always will be treated innocent, right? So as to have a fair justice. Now the trial needs to give bail only if the accused proves that he is not guilty of money laundering, right? So that means the burden of proof or the burden of responsibility lies on the accused. The second case or the second condition uh, under the the recent case of July 27, on the slim chance of getting bail, the accused has to prove that he is not likely to commit any offense while on bail, right? So the accused has to prove, that he is not likely to commit any offense while on bail, right? So he has to satisfy these two conditions, and only when the person satisfies these two conditions, the bail provision can be availed. So in this sense, it has made bail or rendering of bail virtually impossible. Right? It's quite difficult to prove yourself, not guilty of money laundering. The burden of proof lies on you. Second, you have to promise and prove that you're not likely to commit any offense while on bail. Correct. Now, this verdict is a hurdle for under trials, right? Because they would remain in the under trial, they would remain under trials because of the bail provision becoming virtually impossible. Right? Students, we must understand that nearly 4,700 cases are being investigated by Enforcement Directorate, the agency under PMLA. And of the 6 lakh prisoners across the country, around 80% of them are under trials. Can you imagine? 80% of the total prisoners are under trials. And if you take away the provision of bail under PMLA, then it would be actually, become a hurdle, obstacle for the under trials. Right? So therefore, this PMLA's verdict under this case of Vijay Madan Lal Chaudhary versus Union of India has this controversial twin condition for bail. Right. So, and this twin condition also apply if the accused seeks anticipatory bail. Right. That means before the arrest is being made. In short, the accused has to prove he is not guilty even to seek protection from arrest. Right. So even in order to seek protection from arrest, the accused has to prove that he is not guilty. Now, the judgment students have also said that an under trial who has already spent half the punishment term in prison cannot seek bail as an absolute right. So those who under trials who have spent half of the punishment in the prison cannot seek bail as an absolute right. So the Supreme Court found the bail conditions under PMA well suited to combat the menace of money laundering, which it called an aggravated form of crime world over. It also dismissed arguments made by petitioners that an accused could be detained unconditionally once the trial court frames charges under PMA. Right. So this is the issue. So it's been said that bail and not jail should be the rule, and this is what the Chief Justice and the court said in order on July 11. Right, bail and not jail should be the rule. That means one must promote bail so that the 80% of the prisoners which are under trials may be released, or may see justice. So jails in India are flooded with under trial prisoners. More than two-thirds of the inmates of prisons constitute under trial prisoners, right? And of this category of prisoners, the majority may not even be required to be arrested. So this article, a very important one on the PMLA verdict of Vijay Madan Lal Chaudhary versus Union of India, explored has given this, Supreme Court has held the controversial twin condition for bail. Now, the PMLA, defines the crime itself in very vague terms. What is termed as proceeds of crime is also, subject to discretion. It is something which is a proceeds of crime may be defined to mean property that is obtained out of commission of a crime relating to a scheduled offense. And the schedule in the law's present iteration contains an array of breaches under 30 different statutes. Right. So therefore, there are many laws which are being used to arrive at the PMLA offense. So there is something called as scheduled offense or predicate offense. So predicate offense are the component of the primary offense, right? So we learn about predicate offense. Predicate offense is a crime that is a component of a more serious crime. Getting my point? So, for example, if I say about PMLA or money laundering, now unlawful funds is the primary offense, right? Having an access to unlawful funds is a primary offense, and money laundering is the predicate offense, right? So, predicate offense is a crime. So, money laundering is a crime that is a component of a more serious crime, and the more serious crime is unlawful collection of funds. So, unlawful collection of funds becomes a primary offense, and money laundering itself is a predicate offense. So, money laundering or predicate offense is a basis or foundation on which something rests. Right? The term predicate offense is usually used to describe money laundering or terrorist financing activities. Crimes that are specific to anti-money laundering programs have been referred to as predicate offenses. Since the establishment of FATF 40 recommendations in October 2004, and since 2004, Financial Action Task Force have updated the 40 recommendations to expand the list of predicate offenses. Getting my point? So the primary offense may be, let's say, a terror activity or unlawful funds, and the predicate offense is money laundering. So we can get clarity from this representation. A predicate crime is a crime which is a component of a larger crime. Getting my point? So the larger crime is, in this case, the produce collection of unlawful funds, and AML or anti-money laundering is component of a larger crime. In the AML world or anti-money laundering world, a predicate crime is any crime which leads either to money laundering or terrorist financing. Right. Examples of such predicate crimes are as given below, like bribery, smuggling, embezzlement, illegal arms sale, computer frauds, human or drug trafficking. So this is a list of all the predicate crimes: arms trafficking, arson, concealment of assets, and these are being you indicated by these money laundering laws like FinCEN, FATF 2018, FATF 214, European Union, MLD, money laundering, etc. So counterfeiting products, counterfeiting currency, cybercrime, drug trafficking, environmental crime, forgery, fraud, kidnapping, hostage taking, organized crime, piracy, robbery, sexual exploitation, smuggling, tax crime. They all are these all offenses are the predicate crimes. This is how it looks. 22 predicate offenses like corruption, trafficking in stolen goods, murder, and grievous bodily harm (GBH). Then tax crime relating to both direct and indirect taxes, environmental crime, cyber crime, so and so forth. And then they point to the money laundering. They all are called money laundering. If the proceeds which arise from illegitimate money are you know uh, transferred into legitimate money. So this is about the predicate offense. Now let us come back to the article. Now, although the offense under the PMLA is separately prosecutable, unless the proceeds of crime relate to a scheduled offense, or what is also described as a predicate offense, no fees can be made out under the statute. Right. So until unless you don't describe that the proceeds of crime relate to a scheduled offense, which are which is being listed, you cannot say that it comes under the category of Money Laundering Act or PML, right? And this is a list of predicate offenses, the predicate offenses. So it becomes quite difficult. And in other words, if a person is ultimately acquitted or discharged in a case concerning the predicate offense, the charge under the PMLA can no longer be maintained. Getting my point? I repeat, if a person is ultimately acquitted means freed or discharged in a case concerning the predicate offense, the charge under the PMLA can no longer be maintained. Right. Now, the ruling either falls back on familiar misgivings in India's criminal procedural law or the further violations of the constitution. So the PMLA, as held by the Apex Court, is not a penal statute but a sui generis one. That means a specific one, which means that the law can, according to the court, overlook several constitutional safeguards, including the right against self-incrimination. That we say that no person shall be forced to incriminate against himself or herself. So this is what we discuss here. So the court, Apex Court has emphasized that PMLA is a specific spatial legislation, and the nature of an inquiry is against the procedure of crime and is not investigation. Is not investigation in the strict sense of the term for initiating prosecution. The authorities under that are not police officers. As such, it said it is neither a pure regulatory legislation nor a pure penal legislation. Right? Because the authorities are not police officers, because EDs are not being identified as police officers. It is an amalgam of several facets essential to address the scourge of money laundering. As such, in one sense, it is a sui generis, means it is a special legislation. This is what is being held by the Apex Court. Coming to our case, the article. PML is not a penal statute but a sui generis one, which means that the law can, according to the court, overlook several constitutional safeguards, including the right against self-incrimination. Right. So this one is important case article which you must read. Now, even there is one more case which needs special attention here. Mukesh Tarakan Shah versus Union of India. Now, in Mukesh Tarakan Shah, the Apex Court declared this version as unconstitutional, and the court found the classification between offences unreasonable and the conditions themselves too disproportionate. Right. Because prior to an amendment made in 2018, the law classified the predicate offences contained in the schedule into two categories. Right. So the predicate offences were categorized into two categories. It separated those which carried with it an imprisonment for a term no less than 3 years from other offences. So those offences which attract 3 years imprisonment and those which attracts greater than 3 years or less than 3 years. You know, less than 3 years. So there are two categories. One is greater than equal to 3 years punishment, and the other is less than 3 years punishment. The twin requirement was mandated only for those cases where the predicate offences were viewed as more serious. Now, Parliament could have introduced a new provision for bail by removing the defects pointed out by the court, but instead it chose to delete the classification that it had made and imposed through Section 45 the twin conditions for all offences under the PMLA. Now, the Vijay Madanlal case not only grants sanction to Parliament's effort at reintroducing a law previously declared unconstitutional, but also holds that the requirements for bail are by no means arbitrary or unreasonable. Right. So the twin requirements for bail has rendered the bail provision as impossible, and by no means it is, so therefore it is being said to be unreasonable and unfair and arbitrary. The court also held that in the case Putaswamy versus Union of India, where right to privacy was being interpreted under the fundamental right, Article 21 is the right to life and liberty. Now here the Apex Court said that fundamental rights operate not in silos, or they operate not in isolation, but by giving and taking meaning from each other, and that any invasion of a constitutionally guaranteed freedom must satisfy a test of proportionality. Right. So this was laid down by Justice Kutaswamy case. Correct. They say that the fundamental rights do not operate in isolation. For example, let's say right to privacy. Definitely, if a person is being denied the his or her privacy, then his Article 21, which is the right to life and liberty, is infringed. Not only this, Article 19 is also infringed because if a person is denied privacy, then he or she may not be expressed himself or herself freely, right? And this actually violates freedom of speech and expression under Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A. Again, Article 14, which is the right to equality, is also being infringed. Why? Because if let's say, because see, privacy also means bodily integrity, right? Bodily autonomy. Let's say, for example, the transgenders. If there are no, proper conditions in the society for transgender, and there is no identification of, their sexual orientation, then there is a violation of Article 14 also. Definitely, they have been treated unequally, right? So this is called a golden triangle. Article 14, 19, and 21. Right? So they all are interlinked. Right? So therefore, it says that the fundamental rights, and in Puttaswamy, the Supreme Court reiterated that fundamental rights do not operate in silos, but by giving and taking meaning from each other, and that any invasion of constitutionally guaranteed freedom must satisfy a test of proportionality. Now we must understand this test of proportionality. There are two conditions of the for there are two tests for the test of proportionality. Number one, there must be a rational nexus or connection between the law which you have framed, which is supposedly taking away your fundamental right, let's say Article 19, Article 21, and the objective to be achieved. Right. So there must be a rational nexus, rational connection, between the objective of the law and the law. Right. That means the reason behind law or the objective of the law must match the law itself, right? So there must be a rational nexus. Number one. Number two, there, I mean, the executive must have exhausted with all the other measures, to curb the fundamental right before it uses this. So in this sense, it should be used as a last resort. Right. So when the executive had satisfied itself that there was no less invasive means available to achieve the same aim, then only such restrictions on the fundamental exercise of fundamental rights in the like 19 must be used. So in this sense, the grand principles championed there in abstracts have failed to translate into genuine constitutional advancement. Instead, personal liberty has increasingly come to be seen as a pettifogging irrelevance. Pettifogging is something irrelevant or unimportant. So liberty or personal liberty today is being seen as a pettifogging irrelevance. So this is a scathing article on PMLA verdict and very important. And I expect a question on Prevention of Money Laundering Act and the recent verdict of under Vijay Madan Lal Chaudhary versus Union of. I hope it is clear. Moving ahead. So PMLA Amendment Act 2019 treats money laundering as a standalone crime. It also expands the ambit of the proceeds of crime to those properties which may directly or indirectly be derived or obtained as a result of any criminal activity. And ED will be empowered to arrest an accused without an arrest warrant subject to certain conditions. We know that ED or Enforcement Directorate is a law enforcement agency and economic intelligence agency responsible for enforcing economic laws and fighting economic crime in India. Right. This question also appeared in the score booster series, the mock test. One of the main functions of ED is to investigate offences of money laundering under the PMLA Act of 2002. and it can take actions like confiscation of property, so on and so forth. Now, what are the global EU enforces the following laws? FEMA of 1999, which is Foreign Stream Management Act, and PMLA 2002. Now the question comes that what are the you know global efforts to combat money laundering? First is Vienna Convention, which we also discussed in our previous session. 1990 Council of Europe Convention. Then you have Cheaton's Basel Committee Statement of Principles, FATF, Financial Action Task Force, headquartered at Paris, and the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime. So this is how the dirty money or the illegitimate money is being placed into the financial system, where it is being transferred between various offshore onshore banks, and then it is finally integrated into the legal stream of money, and the person can purchase luxury assets, financial investments, commercial, industrial investment. So that's all about this article. I hope you understood. Moving to the next news article on the screen about blasphemy and hate speech, and how you'll draw a line between or distinction between blasphemy and hate speech. Well, students, these days, many you might have seen that even political dissent or government's criticism is being identified as hate speech, and the government is clamping down on any such expression of the people. And when such things happen, it actually violates the fundamental right, Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A, which is freedom of speech and expression. And this infringement of this vital right is the indication of death of democracy, where one cannot express himself or herself freely, right? So everything today is being, categorized into sedition. It is being categorized. It is being clamped down under IT Act. It is being characterized as hate speech. Right. On the other hand, you have blasphemy. Now, blasphemy is any statement by word or writing which actually, insults the religion of the people, or the religious belief of the people. Right. Any statement which actually, insults the religion or the religious belief of the people is called as blasphemy. Right. Now there must be a distinction between blasphemy and hate speech, right? Because we cannot mix them up. Now, blasphemy do not have a statutory law, so there is no statutory law in India for blasphemy. But I section 295A of IPC, protects the sanctity of religions, and thus, you can say that blasphemy is being covered under section 295A of Indian Penal Code, but you don't have a separate legislation for blasphemy. So this actually, shows the inadequacies of the free speech laws. What regulations govern criticism versus hate speech has to be explored. Now, as far as laws in India go, there isn't formal legislation against blasphemy. As I said, that there is no law against blasphemy. Now, in UK, there is a law for blasphemy, but in India, we don't have it. Now, the closest equivalent to a blasphemy law is Section 295A IPC. Right, Section 295A IPC, which punishes any speech, writings, or signs that, with premeditated and malicious intent, insults the citizen's religion or religious beliefs. Now, the history of Section 295A IPC can be traced back to 95 years. In 1927, a satire was published, which had obscene parallels to the Prophet's personal life, right? And it was indeed very offensive to the Muslim community. But Lahore High Court observed that the author of this satire did not cause animosity or hostility between any communities, and thus it is fair and good. I mean, there is no, it is not, does not constitute offense. Thus, the offense did not fall under Section 153A IPC, which deal with maintaining public tranquility or order. Now, however, this incident gave rise to demand, that there must be a law to protect the sanctity of religion. It is not that any person can, say anything about the religion. So what happened in Nupur Sharma's case also, and even Mohammed Zubair, the co-founder of Alt News, was arrested for tweeting a still picture from a movie that had some religious context attached to it, right? And he was being slapped by section 295A of IPC and the blasphemy charges. But ironically, and there is no such charges against Nupur Sharma, who also insulted Prophet. So, so there must be a proper legislation and a robust legislation to protect the sanctity of religion. The legality of Section 295A, which had been challenged in the Ramji Lal Modi case of 1957, was affirmed by a five-judge bench of Supreme Court, and the Apex Court reasoned that while Article 19, Clause 2, now 19, Clause 2 talks about all the reasonable restrictions to freedom of speech and expression. Getting my point? Like the restriction of public order, national integrity, sovereignty, decency, morality, friendly relations with the foreign nations, right? The punishment under Section 295A deals with aggravated form of blasphemy, which is committed with the malicious aim of offending the religious sensibilities of any class. Now, it now the court generally in Ramjilal Modi said that, and in fact decided that the connection between speech and disorder must be like a spark in a powder keg. I think, the government can clamp down freedom of speech and expression only when any, statement written or, said acts as a spark in a powder keg. The powder keg is a gunpowder, the barrel of gunpowder, and it acts as a spark in a powder keg, and it actually disturbs the public order, so on and so forth. Now, in the case of Superintendent Central Police, Fatehgarh versus Ram Manohar Lohia, the apex court said that the link between the speech spoken and any public disorder caused a result of it should have a close relationship for retrieving Section 205A IPC. Now, by 2011, it concluded that only speech that amounts to incitement to impending unlawful action can be punished. Right. So this is also was being held by the court. That is, the state must meet a very high bar before using public disturbance. Now it's being seen that observed that the wording of Section 295A is considerably vague and it is too wide. And insulting religious or religious feelings may be disputed or condemned, but it should not be legally outlawed or prosecuted. The reason for this is because hate speech laws are predicated on certain distinction between criticizing or ridiculing a religion and encouraging prejudice or aggression towards individuals or community because of their faith. Right? So this is an important one and must be read by one and all. Today, these days, many stand-up comedians are also being held under guilty, and they are being slapped with the hate speech provisions. And the cases of Mohammed Zubair and Nupur Sharma, show that how regulations don't draw a line between criticism, and premeditated hate speech. So therefore, the blasphemy laws which prohibit religious criticism in general are incompatible with the principle of democratic society. And the only feasible solution that stands on the thin line of protection of faith and questioning hate speech should be keeping blasphemy in the statutes, but decriminalizing it. So we must keep blasphemy law, maintain or frame a blasphemy law, but decriminalize it. So that is the point in question. I hope it is clear. A very important article. We must understand and keep in mind Section 295A of IPC. So, how should one deal with incidents of blasphemy? Well, blasphemy laws which prohibit religious criticism in general are incompatible with the principles of democratic society. Because in democratic society, criticism is the bedrock. of the democratic society. And a democracy itself means free society, right? And in a free and democratic society, there should be no screening of discourse and dissent. The only feasible solution that stands on the thin line of protection of faith and questioning a hate speech should be keeping blasphemy in statutes, but decriminalizing it. Now, blasphemy is one of the world's most abused law when it comes to suppressing the voices of communities, especially minorities, racialists, as well as at many times scientists. Right. About Section 225 IPC, we find the contours of free speech and its limitations with respect to offenses relating to religion. Now, what about the online hate speech? Well, it is being checked by IT Act 2000, year 2000, and Section 66A, 66A, used to, by Section 66A, the central government or the executive got the powers to clamp down, or to pull down any statement written or said on the social media, especially electronic media, which is offensive and menacing. But the word offensive and menacing were very vague and broad and ambiguous, and it was being, misused by the police on their own whims and fancies. Now, in Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, 2015, the apex court, declared that Section 66A is unconstitutional, null, and void. However, in this landmark verdict in 2015, the Supreme Court, which is your Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, the Supreme Court struck down Section 66A as unconstitutional on the grounds that the provision was vague and a violation of freedom of speech. However, the provision continues to be enforced. Now, issues with anti-blasphemy laws, well, there is a lack of a definition for term religion, and it promotes violence, so on and so forth. Now, moving to the next news article. I hope the previous one was clear. Well, India and Oman will be holding the joint military exercise, right? And it would be a 13-day military exercise at, in Rajasthan. And normally they do ask you about the name of the joint military or the joint naval or the joint air force exercises. Now, this joint military exercise between India and Oman in 2022 is by the name Al Nazar 4. I repeat, the joint military exercise between India and Oman is by the name Al Nazar 4. I hope it is clear. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this session. Some important things that we discussed today are blasphemy and hate speech. We discussed about the PMLA and the PMLA verdict recently. We also talked about, the military exercises. We did discuss about the money laundering, as I said, the ED. We discussed about the beach waiver and also the international north-south transport corridor. I hope it is clear. So wish you all the best. See you in the next class, students. Good day. God bless.